I'd like to welcome everyone to Software Spotlight, your front row seat to the latest innovations in software for small business. I'm Michael Burnswag, your host, and each week we are joined by executives at leading software companies to get an insider's perspective on the emerging technologies, business strategies, and market trends shaping the future. Tune in to stay ahead of the curve on leveraging software to boost productivity and growth in your business. Be sure to visit our website, softwareoasis.com, to access our free weekly software newsletter and sign up for our upcoming software webinar series. Today, we're being joined by Sean Languedoc. He's the CEO of Outforced.ai, his fifth tech company, and his company actually helps businesses find the right outsourcing agencies. With a database of over 79,000 tagged agencies and a streamlined filtering process, Outforce AI saves clients time by quickly identifying the top 5 agency matches for their needs. Sean and his team are committed to delivering outstanding service and earning client trust. So, with that, Sean, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Michael, thanks for having me.
Very nice to join you today. And with five tech companies under your belt, obviously you have a bit of a strategy to your journey, and obviously a few years of experience under your belt. So why don't you fill us in on what brought you to where you are, and what the idea behind your solution is?
Yeah, so every time I've started a business, it's been mostly about solving a business problem and enabling that solution through technology. And this is
Sure.
no different. In this case, it solves a problem that I've had with every tech company I've ever started. And that has been that when you're hiring engineers, it's generally a slow process and you want to hire well. And you take your time and you do hire well and you hire a team. Generally, to build a pod of engineers is about a 12-month process before you finally get a cross-functional team up and running. But sometimes you need a quick solution and you need the expertise right then. And that's when you look at outsourcing. One of the reasons you might look at outsourcing. And when you look at outsourcing, it's the opposite problem of engineering. When you're looking for engineers, good ones are deployed. When you're looking for outsourcing, you get swamped. Even when you're not looking for outsourcing, there are too many outsourcing agencies out there. And there's no filter for all the noise of who's doing what well. So I decided to put a filter on that and help people through a much faster and more efficient process get to the right match with an outsourcing agency when and if they want one.
Obviously, there's a huge need for technical talent, and at a high level, technical talent is not only challenging to find, but finding the right technical talent is super important. I know
Mm-hmm.
I've had several large projects that I've managed over the years, and like yourself, started on the internet at the beginning, in the 90s. So a lot of things have changed, and the one thing that hasn't changed is the need for quality talent. So how does the solution work to help ensure a great match for companies that are looking for very specialized talent? And on the flip side of that, for the agencies that are looking to find the right fit for clients, how does the solution work to assure a good fit?
Well, if you ask an agency what's a good fit, they'll tell you anybody and everybody who's willing to pay me. Which is
Sure.
why whenever you ask an agency, can you do something, they'll answer yes. And they might be able to find somebody to do it, but that's not necessarily their expertise. So we really focus on the buyer side, on the client. And before we even go out to agencies, we have pre-vetted them based on what they've said they're good at by a totally different question. Instead of saying, hey, I've got this marketplace client who's building a B2B marketplace for logistics or something like that. Do you do that? And they'll say yes. I say, hey, we're building engineering capacity for a variety of clients in the United States and Canada. If I brought you the perfect client, what business domain would it be in? That's a really
Right.
important question. By the way, am I freezing on your camera? Everything smooth?
No, no, I can see you just
Okay,
fine.
okay, because
Yeah.
you're freezing for me sometimes. So, so the first
Oh, no
question is
worries.
domain expertise, and what they'll do is they'll quickly answer what their real expertise is. They'll be saying, "Hey, yeah, we do health tech, or we'll do marketplaces, or we'll do this." And so now I've tagged them based on what they're actually good at, based on their own volition of an answer, not on what I'm
Sure.
asking. And then I look at their bench, how many people they have and what their technical expertise is in that bench to see, okay, so you're a Ruby on Rails and React developer shop, right? That's kind of your strength. And so I get to know what their bench is like. So now when I get a client who's in marketplaces and logistics
Right.
and they want Ruby on Rails and React, I've got out of my 80,000 companies, probably 150 that are specifically good at that. But the key question after that is not just, are you good for that? Because the key question is really, who do you have when I'm asking? Because the normal motion for you or I before we existed would be to go, forget all this inbox stuff. I don't pay attention to any of that. I'm either going to look on Google or I'm going to ask my friends. And I'll say, hey, Michael, do you know anybody who's good? And yeah, you might know somebody who's really good, but they built a product domain that's totally different. Even if they're really good and they're a good match, chances are their best engineers are already booked out. So that's
Sure.
not necessarily a
Absolutely.
good fit. So that's why we use a very large database to get to a small number of vendors who not only have the right team available, they've also built many of what my client has built. So you talk about that expertise. They built 10 marketplaces in logistics, So they know
Sure.
product better than most of the engineers at my client because it's probably their first time they built an engineering logistics, a marketplace for logistics. And I just use that as a random example. It could be health tech, fintech, whatever. They know that stuff. And and that's the last and most important piece of the puzzle is culture. What's the culture like at my client? Are they, first of all, the engineering environment? Is it, you know, continuous improvement, continuous development? Is it agile on biweekly sprints? Is it waterfall? What kind of work style do they have? And then what are their communication styles? Are they brutally,
Sure. So
aggressive
making sure it's a
and
good
and
fit.
and challenging each other, or are they, take care of people, be nice kind of place? These are very important differences, and you need to match the culture with the culture of the company in order for the communications to be bang on. And if communications is bang on, you got the right people in the room, poof, you run fast.
Sure. And is it typically project based, or do you find a lot of the engagements are ongoing, or what do they look like?
It really depends on the stage of a customer's of a client's journey. So, at a product proof of concept point, a lot of companies, I recommend that you get someone who can advise you technically, but don't necessarily hire them as your CTO. I recommend building something through an agency that has built many in that domain, and then get your proof of concept out. Then you'll figure out whether you got product market fit. Once you have product market fit, then start to build your engineering team, because you might need a totally different engineering team from what
Sure.
you originally thought. And that gets you speed as well. So speed to market. And that I would describe as a project. We slowly replace that proof of concept engineering team with your own team, and then maybe scale it up later on. The next stage would be
Now,
scale ups, where they just got a big check from a venture capital company who's expecting to grow fast. Like I said earlier, it takes a long time to hire a good engineering team. So in the interim, you can plug people in. Sometimes it's staff augmentation, which is where you're plugging them into existing pods and then pulling them back into their own pod, depending on where they are. And then another factor is refactoring. So I talked about Ruby on Rails. That's a great place to start engineering, but it's not a great place to scale. So you might get a big check, and now you've got big accounts, big clients, and you need to refactor your existing bootstrapped, technically deaded product into something that is much more
Right.
clean and smooth and scalable. But your own engineering team needs to support the existing clients. So you have to go get somebody from
Right.
another place, build that new product, and then slowly move your engineering team back in. General answer to the
So,
question is it starts with a project, but it usually lasts a
yeah,
lot longer because the engineering quality that they get is so high and so well-rounded for what they want to do. They generally keep it for a longer term.
and if you don't, I know one thing we didn't really cover. So the founding of Outforce AI, how did the idea come together, and what problem were you trying to solve with Outforce?
Just the fact that there's no filter for all that noise, it was a
Yeah,
problem that I had every time I went outsourcing. I'd go, hey, talk to my friends. Do you know anybody? Do you know anybody? And then they'd either be really expensive because they're so good and they're local, um,
sure,
or they'd be good but booked out, and I know I'd be dealing with somebody else than who I'm talking to. And the other reason I built it is because as entrepreneurs or as CTOs, we really have a good process for hiring and a good process for engagement, and even that can have a bad failure rate. But when it's outsourcing, you're doing it because you need speed and quality, and you don't have time to mess out. But you don't have time to do good due diligence, and you don't have time to ask all
sure.
the right questions and learn the whole process. You don't have a process. So they lack speed, they lack they lack time. Because they don't have time, they don't have the data. Because they don't have the data, they don't have a good selection process. So we provide all three things: speed,
So you've
data.
really done all the vetting, all
Yeah.
of
Well,
that
not all
in
the
the
vetting, as I
background.
said. We get to the
Yeah,
granular vetting as the vendors come in. But even just
sure.
a typical process, you know, if you were to go on your own, you'd probably want to meet the management of the company and the lead engineers of that company. And guess what? They would just sound like they get your business. They know exactly
Yeah.
what I'm talking about. They're going to nail it. And then you find out that they don't have the engineers. They subbed out the ones that you met, and it's not as good a story. And that could be
So
3 months of wasted time, let alone
yeah,
money.
does it range in terms of projects from, something like Python developing or UX design or back end or front end across different tech stacks? Were there things that you can and can't offer in terms of tech for companies, or is it a pretty broad range?
We generally do more than, when you're going to need more than three at least, and you
Right?
want them to work together. If you just need one, UX designer, probably go to Upwork or
Yeah,
Fiverr or Design 99 or something like that, because that's a well serviced market, just the individual gig worker. The problem with when
sure.
you start building a cluster of gig workers is there's no sense of community or accountability across those workers. And that's the advantage of going B2B like we are. We're connecting you to an agency that has a whole bunch of people from which they can draw, that know your business and know your tech stack in one place. And they're accountable within their own organization, which also takes a lot of weight off your own shoulders. But we stay involved once we've done the matching. So sometimes we've had clients where they've hired 12 or 15 contractors
Right.
from a company, and in that process, even though we're introducing them to the teams in the interview process before that agency is selected, sometimes there's a runt in their litter, right? Somebody didn't
Right.
work out as well. Technically they were absolutely sound, their resume was stellar, but they didn't have the right communication skills, and
Sure.
you want to replace that person, or it's just not working. It's quote unquote not working out. So
Right.
the client usually comes back to me and they say, "Hey, Jose's not working out." I go back to the vendor and I say, "Look, Jose's not working out. We need four alternatives before the next sprint." And they line up a
Right.
bunch of interviews with my client, and boom, by next sprint, that person Jose's replaced, and everyone's working fine. So that's the kind of nice thing about agency versus individual,
Right.
and why
And
we
I
work in
think,
that space.
yeah, obviously outsourcing is fantastic because they are just that. They're not an employee, so you have
Mm-hmm.
the opportunity to, very quickly iterate and find the right fit, which
Exactly.
is great. Obviously, much lower friction and much smoother transition or process. And as far as the actual,
Yeah. When it
getting up and
works out really
running,
well.
once a client comes to you, yeah, when a client first comes to you, what does the process look like?
Sorry, I lost you for a second there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, when a client first comes to you with a project, what does that process look like from when they start until they're up and running?
We do an interview with the lead engineering, specifically the lead engineer that's going to be managing that team, because that's the person who we need to know what their communication style is like. Obviously, we meet the CTO and we get an overall picture from the CEO, maybe, and then we pitch that out. So, like I said, we have that tagging based on domain expertise, tech stack. Then we do a ton of work from there. So we'll send it out to maybe the requirements, maybe to 150 companies in our database that are well matched on paper. And only when we get the feedback from those companies do we figure out who's sort of top 20. And then we let the client review what we think are top 20. We rank them based on communication skills, all the things that they're looking for. It's kind of like I would
Sure,
describe a Moneyball report. So it's very easily digested. And then we let the client decide which of the top 5 that they want to interview. And then we walk them through a full interview process. And I mean, it's incredible what happens. The expression on the faces of the people involved goes from highly skeptical. You guys sound like a recruiter or
yeah,
another one of these engineering shops. And once they realize we're really not, we're helping them guide them through a really what would otherwise be a very long and arduous process, making it really easy and quick for them.
sure,
Once they see the last 5 and they get down to sort of the last 2, they really are. They're kind of saying, "Hey, it's a flip of the coin. Who would you choose?" The the amount of excitement starts to rise, but it's still skeptical until the first 2 sprints. Then it's the
sure.
best part is after about a couple sprints, they go, I want more of give me 10 more of these people. Like, this is awesome.
Yeah, yeah. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And, obviously at a high level, it adds a ton of value. With the short supply of quality technical expertise, where are you finding most of the talent at this point?
Yeah. Well, it's weird. You read the press and you talk about all the layoffs in tech, and then you realize all the best engineers are still employed. So you're right about that statement. The great engineers are deployed. Um, but there's always, when you're like, it starts with a big database, right? When you start with big, you will find, here's an example. We had a client in the banking industry. They were building what's called a BASCO, banking as a service company. So basically the infrastructure of a bank,
Sure.
and then they would provide payment rails and all kinds of things to a bank itself. Because most banks are running on very old software that they're hard to get rid of. And this was going from the bottom up. They were actually sponsored by a bank and by Google. Google wanted to get into the big
Okay.
banking industry. So they had a challenge because they needed to hire DevOps, lots of DevOps with banking experience, at least 5 years, preferably 10 years experience. Senior DevOps, by the way, 15 years senior DevOps, 5 years banking experience, and minimum 3 years of Golang. That's a pretty crazy
Wow.
combination, right? So, and this was 3 years ago. Golang had only been around for about 6 years, 5 years, 6 years. So, so the head of engineering of the company used to be the head of partnerships at Accenture. He said, "I don't need you guys. I know everybody. So have at it." So
Yeah.
he went around and he came back about a month and a half later. He said, "You know what? I know a lot of people, but they're just not the right ones. We'll give you guys a chance.
Yeah.
And within a
Sure.
week, we had 20 companies. Within the next week, we were down to the 7, and all of them had built Bascos in Golang. Two of
Wow.
them had a team that was just coming off a project that had just finished a Basco
Wow.
in Golang, just finished project. So they had all the people already working together. And as you know, when you have two engineers who work together, that's like 5 times productivity. So he had 7 in each.
Yeah.
We landed 14 engineers, and they, boom, hit the ground running. They were already saying, I wouldn't do it this way. I'd start with this product and boom, boom, boom. It was just
Yeah.
so magical. But that would never have happened without having started with a big database.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And so it sounds like the tech of your tech is really the secret sauce.
Well, there's a lot of tech in the back office stuff, just parsing and normalizing the data from resumes, and then QAing that against what the client's looking for before you send it to the client. That's just heavy,
Sure.
heavy lifting stuff that nobody should have to go through. And our philosophy is we don't want anyone to waste their time talking to
Right.
agencies that are a waste of time. And there's a lot
Yeah.
of time you could waste.
And do you find different region? I'm assuming individuals are coming from globally, right, all over the world. Do you
Or
find
next door.
different,
Yeah, we,
or
we
yeah? So it could
literally
be
we have
anywhere.
thousands in the United States, and about 1,000 in Canada agencies.
And for companies that are possibly looking to outsource a project or something like that, what do you recommend as best practices for getting started? With their first outsourcing.
I would say get set up for it. So that means have somebody who's point person within the organization who's going to be responsible for it. The best practice I see is, if you, and this is, forget about the selection process. Once you've engaged with an outsourcing agency, give them some technical debt. See, that's low
Sure,
risk, and you can just see how well they work. Because if it doesn't work out, you can cut them fast and start over again, or go to your next choice. Um,
sure,
but if you're doing it as a strategy, for growth and scalable growth, then pick an agency that's going to have the depth, going to have the technical expertise, going to have a good working relationship with you. There's some beautiful questions we love to ask in the selection process that
sure.
really highlights how well they work. But the and but when you're bringing them in, split them out. If you've got enough people in your engineering team, put 3 or 4 of them, put them 1 or 2 into each pod, so that they can understand how that pod works. They can understand the product from the rest of the team that's
Right.
been there for a long time, and then pull them back into being their own pod, as opposed to have them a standalone over here and everybody else already way ahead of the program in terms of engineering speed. Let them get integrated with others and then pull back into their own. And then they're more accountable to themselves, but they fully understand the logic, the culture, and everything else about the organization they're working with.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So the cultural fit is really the magic.
Oh
Making sure
yeah,
you have the right, yeah,
yeah,
making sure everything's a good alignment.
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
And for a lot of the companies that are you have in the database as contractors. Do you see the same companies come up over and over again if they're doing a good job, for different projects, or is there you know some repeat offenders in the match?
There's no repeat offenders. You get one chance. Um, the But yeah, good companies. We would, we all. It's kind of like, I got to think of outsourcing as like having a baby, and you've
Yeah,
grown your baby for a little while, and now it's time to go to daycare because you got to go back to work, or you got other things to work on. You're not just going to take your daycare to somebody you found on the internet randomly, right? It's
sure.
going to be a trust relationship. It's really precious, and you don't want to screw it up. So that's the kind of care we take to finding the right match. and the kind of care you should take to finding your own right match if you're doing it on your own. Really do take the time for the proper due diligence, and don't believe necessarily the stories that they tell of all the great successes. Look for the failures and ask them how they manage those failures, because
Yeah.
that's really important for how you're going to communicate going forward. If you can tell they're lying when they tell you that, oh, no failures, or yeah, we solved that problem, you really want to know what their policies and processes are, in terms of managing when things go wrong. Because guaranteed in any engineering project, something could go quirky.
Yep. So I guess the other question is for clients that are first coming to you that may have, obviously done something different in the past.
Mm.
What are some of the other alternatives that companies are familiar with, or maybe even more familiar with, over and above this type of model and how does it compare to some of the other ways of recruiting talent?
Well, the most normal procedure is to just try it on your own, right? And the problem
Right.
is, you've got it. Like I said, you don't necessarily have a process or data to work with. There's some sites that'll give you a list of top engineering firms, but they tend to be advertising driven. So, or they're getting money, or there's consultants who will get money from the agencies themselves. And so those are the differences. We don't take any money from any agency. Our model is that the client pays us and we pay the agency. And
Sure.
it's kind of like a finder fee of a recruiter, but it's business to business and down to the agency. And nobody has any problem with the rates we're charging because of the amount of time and the quality of the solutions that we're finding them. But we have no stake in anyone's game on the vendor side.
Yeah.
It's really up to the client.
Yeah. So for the clients, you really have a vested interest in making sure that they're happy.
100%.
100%.
A
Yeah.
100%.
Makes
And
makes a lot of
the
sense.
agencies, we also got a better negotiating position too. Like you can
Sure.
find a list of agencies anywhere, anytime. You just look at your inbox for that matter.
Right.
But good luck trying to figure out all the things we figure out for you in a short period of time. Like we can get you stood up with an agency with the top 5 list in a matter of a couple of weeks. That would take
Yeah.
normally starting from a small list, it would take you 3 months just to do the diligence, and
Right.
then onboarding and cultural fit and all that stuff might not be aligned as well. So that's the hard part. And even if you went on a site and found 10 agencies that you sound look great, guess what? They've paid to be listed that high on that list. And if they are great, they might not have the right people at the right time. So again, it's better to start big and move to small rather than start small and take a bet.
Sure. And do you have an example of a client or two that you could share with us, and their success with the solution?
Yeah, I mean, as I described, the one company was building from scratch a Basco, and they got that 2 amazing teams, and then they expanded even more. Those were 2 Eastern European companies, and then they added a Costa Rican company. Um,
Sure.
there's another one. So another, as I talked about refactoring, it seems to be a common example. And in that case, they're sometimes when you're growing a company, you're kind of recruiting in your best friend as the CTO, right? You give him or her a bunch of equity to build stuff. That equity can cost a lot when you scale up and you realize your friend isn't actually the best CTO for the company, and they're really good at bootstrapping some stuff together, and they're really good at hacking away at code. But when it comes to scaling an engineering team and all that stuff, not necessarily the right person. And the first person who's going to tell you that is going to be your venture capital investor.
Sure.
They'll take a quick look and go, now team needs to be upgraded, and you have to have that hard conversation. So we've seen a lot of companies like that, and they did all the right things in the beginning, bootstrapping the technology, and maybe copying and pasting for a new big client, copying and pasting for another new big client, and now you've got this sort of patchwork of code that is built on debt, and now you're getting more tickets than you are new product releases. That's when we come in, and what we've done in the past is we would find either an agency that has really good solution architect built into their team, or
Sure.
we've cherry picked some of these really, really superstar solution architects to come in and re-architect the whole stack. And then we contract out the heavy lifters in DevOps and front end engineering and everything to build that new stack. And that's been a very cost effective way of getting superstar engineering in on a fractional basis and then bringing in the rest. And that engineer would be working with the existing engineer, perhaps helping that person grow up to be the engineer that would last through a VC round. But sometimes it also means that sometimes that person is sometimes replaced.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. And obviously, cultural fit is very important for your clients.
Hmm.
Can you talk a little bit, as a company, Outforce AI, a little bit about your vision and values and core values as a company and how that kind of fits into what you're doing for your clients in terms of helping them get the right type of fit?
So within the company, you could ask anybody about the culture. It's very people driven. We are I would describe us today as a travel agency from the 1990s, right? We know which
Sure.
hotels you should go to, what airlines you should take, and if you have any problems, we're there to help you get through them. Um, and and so very, very hands-on. So it's a very people-oriented company. However, we're using a lot of technology in the background to make things faster for the client. Um, and then and we're slowly automating that. In fact, we're moving towards becoming a bit of an Expedia where you could self-serve, but there's so many
Sure.
places that you can go wrong in the process on your own, as it described, asking the wrong questions or interviewing the wrong people, that we're going to slowly iterate towards that over the course of a couple of years. So that's a bit about us. And in terms of our satisfaction level, there is nothing better than, as I described, that second or first sprint call when the CTO, who might have taken the call reluctantly in the first place or was very skeptical of the
Sure.
process, is calling and saying, "Man, I'd love to have more of those kinds of people. How can I get them?" And we have. So as I said, on your own, it takes you 3 months to 6 months to get this whole process done. We can do it in 3 weeks to 4 weeks,
Wow.
and we have, and on your own, statistically, there's a 49% chance of failure. Very similar to hiring, right?
Right.
We have a 98% success rate. And when we have success, I mean, that 90% is, again, just that one person out of the team that didn't fit, not the whole team. And the customer delight is palatable.
And that's got to be so gratifying. And obviously, cutting the volume of misses and failures is worth it just on its own. So
Yeah.
for clients that are looking to take that first step, obviously we'll leave a link in the show notes and all of that. But
Mhm.
what does the journey look like from that initial discovery call through to the point where they're actually up and running with Outforce AI? What does the journey look like?
It's a two-step process: discovery call and then engagement agreement. We'll let them look at some of the database. Once they get, they can even filter on their own for their picks based on the first cut
Sure.
database. In fact, we have it up on our site. It's redacted on the web, but if you go to outforced.ai, you
Right.
can see some of that. It's great. You find them, and then do you want to send 50 companies an email saying, "Hey, we're interested in your services"? Are you kidding? You're bad enough getting your inbox filled already with all those
Yeah.
vendors. So that's the
Yeah.
heavy lift that we take away for the client, is just filtering all that feedback. And the vendors sales rep saying, "Hey, I just want to talk to you a little bit more about the project."
Yeah.
Everything's in the project, right? In the project notes that we send them. So
So you're really just delivering the deliverable of what they need for their project, and all of
exactly.
the
So really,
back and
it's
forth and in between is
yeah, it's get to know a bigger, deeper dive on their project, what their goals are, what they're trying to achieve in context of the business, let alone the technology. And then going out and seeing what we can pull in for them. And that's a
Sure. No, I mean, it sounds like a no-brainer for any organization that's looking to scale up their tech staff for, specific projects or roles that they may not have internally, and to
yeah,
cut out the failure and go directly to success. I think that's
exactly.
the
It's too
strategy,
big
right?
a risk. It's just, it's the months of work, the onboarding, forget the money. It's just the time. If, today, especially with AI, time is your enemy, but speed is your momentum, right? So if you've been funded, every one of your competitors are going to go after what you're building right now. So you need to
Right.
build it fast, and you need expertise to build that fast. So you can hire slowly, which is good, but I would hire a contracting company to get it up fast and keep ahead and slowly replace that contracting company with your own hires.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out to join us on the Software Spotlight this week. That was really quite fascinating. A different peek into the behind the scenes of tech, and I think a lot of our listeners will appreciate. So,
I
thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much for
If I have one more
for
thing to
joining
add,
us.
one more
Yeah,
thing to add.
absolutely.
Some people go for a country, right? Some people think outsourcing equals India equals low cost. That can be true, but it can also be radically false. Cost, if that's your first priority, you will find cheaper outsourcing options, and you'll find cheap outsourcing options in India. But I'm just generally, you can find cheap. But you ask any engineer whether they want cost or quality, you're going to end up building it over again if it's all based on cost. And the other place people go wrong is geography. That's like saying I'm from Canada, right? So people think of hockey
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Canada. So they think, okay, engineering, Ukraine, Poland, da da da. And and you know what? I'm a skier. So if you pick Canada to build a hockey team and you land it on me, you're not in great shape. You'll get an ankle sprain.
Right.
So
Yeah.
so it's really, don't pick the geography, pick the best company with the best team that's available, and limit your geography based on what time zone constraints you're willing to live with. If you're on the East Coast like you are, Michael, in Boston, you know,
Right.
Eastern Western Europe isn't so bad. You can probably do a 4 hour overlap. But if it's India, you have to be prepared to work asynchronously and not be communicating, or else you're going to be spending overnight talking to your India team, and that's no fun.
Right. No,
So
not at all.
yeah,
So
so
find the
figure
best
out geography
talent no
and
matter where
figure out
they
what
are.
you need. Yeah,
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
Well,
Okay.
thank you so much for sharing. I think that was a good final tip. And coming up on our next episode, we have Rayo Chijarla. He's the founder and CEO of Expeed Software. Rayo started Expeed in 2008. I guess that would be very early in the years of the internet to help enterprises with application development and digital transformation. He brings extensive experience in software tech and SaaS platforms. Rayo holds a Bachelor of Technology degree in computer science and engineering, and we're going to welcome him to the show coming up next week. So, once again, Sean, thank you so much for joining us on the Software Spotlight this week.
Thank you for having me.